The crack of dawn light filtered through the dusty windows of Zane Armstrong's Manhattan penthouse as he stared at the skyline one last time. This view had once represented everything he'd worked for: his shipping empire, his status, his relentless drive. Now it just reminded him of emptiness, of board meetings filled with sharks, of handshakes that felt like declarations of war. Today, at 35, he was walking away from it all. 6 hours later, his custom Range Rover bumped down an unpaved road in the rolling countryside of western Pennsylvania. Zane had surprised everyone, including himself, when he'd purchased a 30-acre farm site unseen. After selling his controlling interest in Armstrong Shipping for a staggering $87 million, he'd stunned his executive team by announcing his immediate retirement. No warning, no transition plan, just gone. The farmhouse appeared around the bend, looking significantly more weathered than it had in the listing photos. The white paint peeled in strips from the wooden siding, the wraparound porch sagged noticeably on one side, and what had been advertised as charming vintage features now looked suspiciously like desperately needs updating. "Perfect," Zane muttered, a small smile forming. This was exactly what he wanted: a project, a challenge that had nothing to do with quarterly earnings reports or hostile takeovers. He was unpacking the essentials from his SUV when the unmistakable sound of hooves caught his attention. A chestnut horse trotted up his driveway, its rider a woman with auburn hair spilling from beneath a worn cowboy hat. She pulled the horse to a stop about 20 feet away. "You must be the city slicker who bought the old Harmon place," she called out, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. Zane straightened, taking in her worn jeans, flannel shirt, and the easy way she sat in the saddle. "Guilty as charged," he replied. "Zane Armstrong, Leela Novak," she answered, removing her hat and revealing eyes the color of spring leaves. "I run the farm next door. 300 acres, been in my family 4 generations. Impressive. Its work is what it is," she said bluntly. She gestured toward his house. "That place has been empty for 2 years. Roof's got a leak on the west side and the well pump struggles in dry weather." She wasn't asking a question, just stating facts. Zane nodded. "Thanks for the heads up. Just being neighborly." She settled her hat back on her head. "You planning on staying, or is this some kind of vacation home?" "I'm staying," he said firmly. Leela studied him for a long moment. "Well, if you need anything, my place is just over that rise. Can't miss it. Big red barn, windmill, lot of angry geese." Without waiting for a response, she clicked her tongue, turned her horse, and trotted away. That night, Zane sat on his sagging porch, nursing a glass of expensive scotch that felt strangely out of place here. In the distance, he could see the lights from Leela's farmhouse, a yellow glow against the darkening sky. For the first time in years, he felt something that resembled peace. The next morning brought a brutal reality check. Zane woke at dawn, not from habit but because of the deafening rooster somewhere nearby. The old farmhouse was freezing the heating system, apparently decided overnight that retirement was also an option. When he turned on the shower, the pipes groaned ominously before spitting out rusty water. "What have I done?" he muttered, staring at his reflection in a cracked bathroom mirror. His dark hair was disheveled and stubble darkened his jaw. He looked nothing like the polished CEO who had graced the cover of Business Insider just 6 months ago. 3 hours and numerous YouTube tutorials later, Zane had managed to get the hot water heater working again. He was congratulating himself when a knock at the door interrupted his moment of triumph. Leela Novak stood on his porch, a basket in her hands. "Brought you some basics," she said without preamble. "Eggs from my chickens, fresh bread, some preserves." She looked past him into the house. "Place still standing?" "Barely," he admitted, taking the basket. "Thank you for this," she shrugged. "Like I said, being neighborly." She peered at him more closely. "You look like you've been wrestling with something." "Hot water heater," he confessed. "I won." A smile flickered across her face, transforming her serious expression. "Congratulations. What's next on your list?" Zane gestured vaguely. "Everything. The roof, the porch, the barn out back that looks like it might collapse if I breathe on it wrong." "Sounds about right," she hesitated. Look, I don't mean to pry, but what exactly are you doing here? This isn't exactly a hobby farm. Starting over, he said simply. Leela's eyes narrowed slightly. From what, Zane considered his answer, a life that didn't fit anymore. She seemed to accept that. Well, if you want that barn to stay upright, you'll need help. I've got a crew coming tomorrow to repair some fencing. They could take a look, give you an estimate. I'd appreciate that, Zane said, surprised by her offer. Don't thank me yet, she warned. Wait until you see the bill. Over the next 2 weeks, Zane settled into a routine that bore no resemblance to his former life. He woke with the sun, spent his days fixing what he could and learning what he couldn't, and collapsed into bed each night with muscles aching in ways he hadn't experienced since high school football. Leela's promised crew had assessed his barn, declaring it structurally sound despite its appearance. They'd fixed his roof and helped him identify other priorities for the approaching winter. Zane had been shocked at the reasonable cost, and even more surprised when Leela herself showed up to help one Saturday, expertly wielding tools and offering advice without being condescending. "So what did you do before this?" she asked as they replaced rotted boards on his porch. "In your previous life," Zane hesitated. He'd been deliberately vague about his background, enjoying the anonymity. "I was in shipping, like delivery guy," he smiled slightly. "More like management." "Must have paid well," she observed, glancing at his Range Rover. "It did," he acknowledged. "But it cost more than it paid." Leela nodded as if she understood completely. "My ex-husband was like that. All work, big paycheck, miserable human being. 3 years now. He couldn't understand why I wouldn't sell the farm and move to Pittsburgh for his career." She hammered a nail with perhaps more force than necessary. "Said I was wasting my education running a farm. I have a master's in agricultural science, by the way." "I wouldn't call that wasting it," Zane said. "Neither would I." She sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. "This land has been in my family for almost a century. My great-grandfather built that house. My grandmother planted those oak trees. You don't just walk away from that kind of legacy." Zane thought about Armstrong Shipping, founded by his grandfather, built by his father, expanded exponentially under his own leadership. He'd walked away from that legacy without a backward glance. "Sometimes legacies become prisons," he said quietly. Leela studied him, her green eyes thoughtful. "And sometimes they're the only things that keep us anchored when the storm hits." That evening, after Leela had gone home, Zane found himself thinking about her words. He'd been so certain about his decision to leave everything behind, but now he wondered if he'd been running away rather than moving toward something new. The question lingered as autumn deepened into winter. The landscape transformed, fields turning golden then brown, trees shedding their leaves in colorful surrender. Zane's farmhouse slowly improved new insulation, repaired windows, a wood-burning stove that kept the living room gloriously warm. His relationship with Leela evolved from neighborly assistance to genuine friendship. She taught him about the rhythms of rural life, explaining crop rotations and introducing him to other local farmers. He found himself looking forward to her visits, the way she challenged his thinking, her dry humor and uncompromising honesty. One bitterly cold December evening, Zane was splitting wood when Leela's truck came barreling down his driveway. She jumped out before it fully stopped. "I need your help," she said, her voice tight with worry. "One of my pregnant mares is down in the far pasture, can't get the tractor through the snow, and I need another set of hands." Without hesitation, Zane grabbed his coat. "Let's go." They took her truck as far as possible, then trudged through knee-deep snow to reach the mare. The animal lay on her side, breathing heavily, clearly in distress. Leela knelt beside her, hands moving expertly over the horse's flank. "She's in labor, but something's wrong," Leela said. "We need to get her back to the barn." For the next 2 hours, they worked together in freezing temperatures, creating a makeshift sled from tarp and branches, carefully maneuvering the distressed mare onto it, then using brute force and determination to pull her back to the barn. By the time the veterinarian arrived, they were exhausted, covered in mud and snow, their clothes frozen stiff. While the vet worked to save the mare and foal, Leela and Zane huddled near a space heater in the corner of the barn. "Thank you," she said simply, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. "I couldn't have done this alone." "You would have found a way," Zane said. "You're the most capable person I've ever met," she smiled tiredly. High praise from a man who built a shipping empire. Zane stared at her, startled. "How did you Google exists even in rural Pennsylvania?" she said dryly. Zane Armstrong, youngest CEO of Armstrong Shipping, Forbes 30 under 30, approximately 87 million reasons to be anywhere but fixing fence posts on a failing farm. "It's not failing," he protested automatically. "No, it's not," she agreed, looking at him curiously. "Why didn't you tell me?" Zane sighed. "Because for once in my life, I wanted to be judged for what I could do with my hands, not my bank account or family name." Leela nodded slowly. "I can understand that," she gestured around the barn. "None of this cares how many commas are in your net worth. A fence post doesn't stand up straighter for a rich man." The vet interrupted their conversation with good news: both mare and foal would survive. As the adrenaline of the emergency faded, exhaustion took over. Leela insisted Zane stay at her farmhouse rather than driving back through the worsening storm. Her home was exactly what he'd imagined: warm, lived in, with family photos covering the walls and handmade quilts draped over worn furniture. It was nothing like the sterile perfection of his Manhattan penthouse or the modern farmhouse aesthetic he'd been gradually creating. "It's not fancy," Leila said, noticing his gaze, "but it's home." "It's perfect," Zane replied, meaning it. "It feels like you." Something shifted between them that night. As they sat before her fireplace, thawing out with more coffee him and whiskey her, their conversation deepened. Leela told him about growing up on the farm, her college years studying agricultural science, her brief marriage to a corporate attorney who couldn't understand her attachment to the land. Zane shared stories of his own: the pressure of taking over the family business at 26 when his father died suddenly, the relentless pace of acquisition and expansion, the gradual realization that his success was costing him his soul. "I woke up one morning and couldn't remember the last time I'd felt genuine joy," he admitted. "I had everything I'd worked for and none of it mattered." "So you bought a falling down farm in the middle of nowhere?" Leela's voice held no judgment, only curiosity. "I remembered my grandfather talking about growing up on a farm before he started the shipping business, how simple and honest the work was, how connected he felt to something real." Zane stared into the fire. "I wanted that feeling, and have you found it?" He looked at her then, really looked at her flushed cheeks from the whiskey auburn hair falling in waves around her shoulders, eyes that seemed to see right through him. "I'm getting closer," he said softly. The blizzard kept Zane at Layla's farm for 2 days. They checked on the mare and foal, fed the other animals, kept the generators running when the power failed. They cooked together, argued about books, discovered a mutual love for terrible science fiction movies. By the time the roads were cleared enough for him to leave, something fundamental had changed. Back at his own farmhouse, Zane found himself missing her constant presence, the sound of her laugh, even their disagreements. He caught himself looking toward her property throughout the day, making up reasons to call or text. Winter settled in fully, bringing short days and long nights. Zane used the time to continue renovating the farmhouse interior, learning carpentry skills from YouTube, and frequent consultations with the local hardware store owner, who had stopped looking at him like an alien after the first month. Leela invited him for Christmas dinner, introducing him to her parents and younger brother. Her father, a retired farmer who still helped with the daily operations, sized Zane up with a critical eye that softened when Zane asked intelligent questions about crop rotation and soil conservation. "He likes you," Leila told him later as they washed dishes together. "That's rare." "I like him too," Zane replied. "I like your whole family. Even my mother asking when you're going to get some decent furniture, especially that part." Their friendship continued to evolve as winter gave way to early spring. Zane found himself helping more and more on Leila's farm, learning practical skills that his Ivy League business degree had never covered. She, in turn, became his consultant on his own property, helping him develop a realistic plan for making the land productive again. One muddy March day, they were walking his property line when Leila stopped suddenly. "You need to decide what you're doing with this place," she said. "Are you farming it or not? Because if you're just playing gentleman farmer while you figure out your midlife crisis, you're wasting good soil." Zane was taken aback by her directness. "I'm not having a midlife crisis. No." "Then what would you call abandoning a successful career to buy a farm you have no idea how to run?" "Finding purpose," he shot back. "Creating something real instead of just moving numbers around on a spreadsheet." "So do it," she challenged. "Don't just fix up the house and mow the fields. Grow something, raise something, commit." Her words stung because they contained truth. He had been treating the farm more like a renovation project than a working enterprise. "I don't know how," he admitted. Leila's expression softened. "That's the first honest thing you've said about this whole endeavor." She gestured to the surrounding land. "This could be a great small operation, specialty crops, maybe some livestock, but you need to decide what you want from it and from this life." That night, Zane couldn't sleep, Leila's words echoing in his mind. She was right, he had jumped into this new life without a clear vision, running away from his old problems rather than toward a new purpose. By dawn, he had made a decision. The next day, he drove to Leila's farm, finding her in the greenhouse starting seedlings for the spring planting. "I want to do this right," he said without preamble. "I want to make my farm productive. Will you help me?" She looked up, brushing soil from her hands. "Why?" "Because you know what you're doing and I don't. Because I respect your knowledge and experience." "No," she shook her head. "Why do you want to farm, really farm, not just live in a farmhouse?" Zane considered her question carefully. "Because I want to create something tangible." In shipping, everything was abstract logistics, contracts, market share. I never actually made anything. I want to grow food that feeds people, raise animals that thrive under my care. I want to work hard and see direct results from that work. Leila studied him for a long moment. "Okay," she finally said. "We'll start with 5 acres. See if you still feel this way after a season of actual farming." They began planning immediately. Under Leila's guidance, Zane prepared a portion of his land for organic vegetable production, focusing on high-value crops that could be sold to restaurants and at farmers' markets. He invested in a small greenhouse, irrigation systems, and essential equipment. As spring progressed, they worked side by side nearly every day. Zane discovered muscles he didn't know he had and a capacity for physical labor that surprised him. The first time he saw seedlings emerging from soil he had prepared himself, he felt a satisfaction deeper than any business deal had ever provided. It wasn't all rewarding moments and steady progress. There were equipment failures, late frosts that damaged tender plants, disagreements about methods and priorities. But through it all, Zane found himself increasingly drawn to Leila, her passion, her integrity, her unflinching commitment to the land. One evening in late April, they were finishing a long day of transplanting when a spring thunderstorm rolled in suddenly. They made a dash for Zane's farmhouse, arriving soaked and laughing. "You need dry clothes," Zane said, heading for his bedroom to find something she could borrow. "I've been rained on before," Leila called after him. "It's practically in the job description." He returned with a t-shirt and sweatpants. Bathrooms down the hall. While she changed, Zane built a fire in the wood stove and put on coffee. When Leila emerged, swimming in his clothes, hair damp and curling around her face, something caught in his chest. "Thanks," she said, accepting the mug he offered. "You've gotten good at this pioneering life. Your fire-building skills have improved dramatically." High praise from the woman who could probably start a fire with 2 sticks in a rainstorm. She laughed. "Only if absolutely necessary." She settled onto his couch, tucking her feet beneath her. "Your house is coming together nicely." Zane looked around at the restored hardwood floors, the freshly painted walls, the carefully chosen furniture that blended comfort with simplicity. "It's starting to feel like home. And the farm, that too," he said, "though I still have a lot to learn." You're a quick study, Leela said. Most city folks would have given up after the first broken tractor or ruined crop. Is that a compliment? He teased. An observation, she corrected, but her smile gave her away. Thunder crashed outside, rain lashing against the windows. The storm had intensified, transforming the early evening into premature darkness. Zane added more wood to the stove, and they settled into comfortable conversation as they had so many times before, but something was different this time. Maybe it was the storm creating a sense of intimacy, or the months of growing closeness between them, or simply the way the firelight caught the gold flecks in Leela's green eyes. Whatever it was, Zane found himself unable to look away from her. "What?" she asked, noticing his gaze. "You've changed my life," he said quietly. Leela looked startled. "You changed your own life. I just showed you how not to kill your tomato plants. It's more than that." Zane moved to sit beside her on the couch. "You challenged me to be genuine, to commit fully to this new path. You didn't care about my money or my background. You judged me solely on my willingness to work hard and learn. That's all that matters here," she said, but her voice had softened. "I came here looking for a simpler life," Zane continued. "I thought that meant fewer complications, fewer demands. But what I've found is that a meaningful life isn't simple at all. It's rich with complexity and connections and responsibilities." "And is that what you want?" Leela asked, her eyes searching his. "It is," he said firmly, "but I've realized something else too." He took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you, Leela. Probably have been since you showed up on horseback that first day to inform me my roof was leaking." Leela's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. "That's a complication I wasn't expecting," she said finally. "Is it a welcome one?" Instead of answering, she leaned forward and kissed him, her lips warm and certain against his. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. "I don't do things halfway, Zane. If we're doing this, it's all in." "All in," he agreed, pulling her closer. The storm raged outside, but neither of them noticed as they discovered this new dimension to their relationship. Later, as rain continued to pour, Leela's head rested on Zane's shoulder. "I need you to understand something," she said. "My farm isn't just my business, it's my heritage, my responsibility. I can't walk away from it." "I would never ask you to," Zane assured her. "I'm not going anywhere either. This is my home now." Summer brought long days of hard work and sweet evenings together. Their relationship deepened as they balanced the demands of two farms and their growing feelings for each other. Zane's crops thrived under their combined care, and by midsummer, he was selling vegetables at the local farmers market alongside Leela. The first time someone referred to them as a couple, neither corrected the assumption. They moved between their two farmhouses with increasing fluidity, clothes and personal items migrating back and forth, until it became difficult to remember which items belonged where. In August, during the height of harvest season, Zane's past came calling. His former CFO tracked him down, arriving unannounced in an incongruous luxury sedan that looked absurdly out of place on the gravel driveway. "The board wants you back," he announced without preamble, standing awkwardly in Zane's kitchen while Leela silently prepared lunch nearby. "The new leadership isn't working out. Stock's down 30%. They're offering you twice your previous compensation package." Zane glanced at Leela, who kept her expression carefully neutral as she sliced tomatoes they had grown together. "I'm not interested," Zane said simply. "You haven't heard the full offer," the CFO pressed. "Full autonomy, private jet, global expansion opportunities. I have everything I need right here," Zane interrupted, moving to stand beside Leela. "I'm building something real, something that matters." After the CFO left, visibly confused by Zane's refusal, Leela turned to him. "You didn't even consider it." "There was nothing to consider," he said honestly. "That life nearly hollowed me out completely. This one with you, with the land, it fills me up." That night, under a sky scattered with stars, Zane proposed. Not with an extravagant diamond that would catch on gardening gloves, but with his grandmother's simple gold band, offered as they sat on the porch of his now restored farmhouse. "Are you sure?" Leela asked, eyes bright with unshed tears. "This life isn't glamorous or easy." I've done glamorous, Zane said, holding her work-roughened hands in his. I'll take real over glamorous any day, and easy is overrated. They married in October when the harvest was complete and the leaves had turned the countryside into a painting of reds and golds. The ceremony took place in the field between their two properties, symbolic of the bridge they had built between their lives. By the following spring, they had legally combined their lands, creating a diversified operation that balanced Leela's traditional farming with Zane's innovative approaches. They maintained both houses, living primarily in Leela's family homestead, while using Zane's renovated farmhouse as a guest house and potential vacation rental. On the anniversary of Zane's arrival, they sat on his porch, their porch now watching the sunset paint the fields with golden light. "Any regrets?" Leela asked, her head resting against his shoulder, her hand absently caressing her slightly rounded belly where their first child grew. Zane thought about the question seriously. "Only that I didn't do this sooner," he said finally. "All those years chasing success, and I had no idea what success actually looked like." "And what does it look like?" she asked, smiling up at him. He gestured to the thriving farm around them, to their intertwined hands, to the future growing between them. "Exactly like this." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, talking about their plans for the coming season, the nursery they would create for the baby, the legacy they were building together, not of wealth or status, but of stewardship, sustainability, and love. The millionaire who had bought a small farm to start over had found far more than a new beginning. He had found his heart's true home.